Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the City of Franklin. It is Thursday, December the 2nd. First item on the agenda is call to order, and I'll do this with a roll call vote. Alderman Peterson. Present. Alderman Potts is not here. Alderman Daggett.
Present.
And the chair is here. So we are present. And the second item on the agenda is consideration of approval of minutes for the October 14th Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'll entertain a motion for approval if there's no additions or deletions to those minutes.
Move for approval.
Proper motions are a second.
Okay.
Do it right.
I will second that.
Okay. Proper motion is a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Excuse me,
Do
Mr.
you
Chair,
need
can you do a roll call vote on those, please?
Okay, we'll do a roll call
Thank you.
vote on that. Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
I was not present, should I recuse myself?
Yeah, no, we'll go ahead and vote.
Aye.
Alderman Peterson,
Aye.
and the chair votes yes. Okay. Next item on the agenda is election of chairman and vice chairman for effective 2022. I'll entertain a motion for chairman. Do I have a motion?
Nominate Alderman Barnhill.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Proper motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
No, sir.
Oh.
Mr. Chair, could we
You still
please
got
have roll call
So we're
vote?
not, so we still got to do a roll call on all
On
of
everything,
those.
sir.
I'll remember that. Roll
Thank
call
you.
vote. Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. The other item on the agenda is the vice chair effective for this year.
Nominate Alderman Peterson.
Proper motion, I'll second that. Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes on that, so we'll save that one. Item 3, I guess let the record show that Mr. Potts was not here yet. Okay. Item 3, report of receiving Government Finance Offers Association Annual Reporting Award for 30 consecutive years.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The reason that we added this item to the agenda is for our 2020 annual report. It actually was the 30th year that we actually have met
Michael, we got
the
it.
Government Finance Officer Association's requirements. And what we thought with this item is it might actually be a walk through memory lane of things that have happened in the 30 years in Franklin. So with the committee's permission, I thought I might go through some of the items that we found in the annual reports over those 30 years.
Do you think maybe Judy Kennedy is looking?
That's it. Absolutely.
All right.
So of those 30 years, I did pull out 10 items.
Okay.
One of them was the opening of Cool Springs Galleria in August of 1991. The second was the receipt of the AAA bond rating from Moody's in December of 2000. The growth in population that we saw over the 30 years. The reduction in the property tax rate over that same period. We saw Franklin become a destination for corporate headquarters. We have new fire stations, a police headquarters, a public works facility, the municipal services complex, and 2 parking garages. There have been water and wastewater plant renovations. We've had new parks in that period, and we also have a transit system in that period. And while all these things were happening, there were things that we noted in the report. There was the mention of the May 2010 flood. There was the Great Recession, as well as what we've just dealt with COVID. So with those, we kind of just wanted to let you know that's how the city has changed in those 30 years. And we are hoping that the report that you're getting ready to hear soon will, in essence, get the 31st consecutive award for the city. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions for Mike? The rest of the item FY 2021 annual comprehensive financial report for the city of Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may give some introductions for items number 4 and number 5, which will be presented together. First of all, on behalf of the staff, the finance staff, and as well as the citywide, we do appreciate the support of our elected officials, the governing body, and this committee for the financial and administrative leadership that you provide to us. This is the culmination of our fiscal year, and this report that is going to be given this afternoon. We have with us Jennifer Matternock. She is the audit principal, and she'll be introducing herself a little bit further with Crossland, who are our external auditors. This is fulfilling a requirement of the state of Tennessee that we be audited by external auditors. And for probably 5 to 6 weeks a year, they actually move into City Hall and they do a comprehensive reporting and testing of our financial books, as well as do other surveys when they are not, actually on site with us. We also have a similar audit performed for the Cool Springs Conference Center, which is a joint venture of the City of Franklin and Williamson County. And we do have representing Chartwell Hospitality, who they are the managers for the Cool Springs Conference Center. We are represented with Andy Duncan. And Andy has served at actually this physical location for several years. All my years here now at Franklin, he has served at this facility. He is currently the food and beverage director for the Marriott Cool Springs and as well as the Cool Spring Conference Center. And we also have Kristen Lamb with us with Chartwell, and she is the finance manager for this property. So they do work closely with your city staff, but they are here representing Chartwell Hospitality, and they have provided documentation for the external audit that you are about to receive here momentarily from Crossland. So we do appreciate everyone's hard work for this audit process, but we're also very pleased to have the auditors before you so that you can hear their report, and it's very important as this committee serves as our audit committee to hear directly from the auditors. So with that, unless there's any other introductory comments, I will ask Jennifer to join us.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Jennifer Monternock. I'm an audit principal with Crossland CPAs in Nashville. I am responsible for leading your audit on both the City of Franklin and the Cool Springs Conference Center, and I also sign the audit opinion on the report. I have a book here, report to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and also to the Finance Committee, that includes a summary of our results of our audit as well as some required communications. Mr. Baggett, I know you're new to the committee, so I may touch upon a few things, go in a little bit more depth. The other aldermen have heard these communications as we are required to communicate them on an annual basis. Starting with our cover letter, a direct line of communication between Crossland as your auditors and you as the Finance Committee is an important part of the audit process. We do have some required communications to go through as well as addressing the results of our audit. If at any time outside this meeting, you are welcome to contact us to speak with us regarding any concerns or questions you may have. You may call me at this number listed here, or David Hunt, who is the pre-issuance reviewer. You're welcome to call him as well if I'm not available. On page 2, this summarizes our results. We've completed the audit for both Franklin and the Cool Springs Conference Center for the year ended June 30, 2021, and we have drafted our opinion, which is included in these financial statements, with an unmodified opinion for both reports. An unmodified opinion is a clean opinion. It's the highest level of opinion you can receive. We are required, the city is required to have an audit performed under the state of Tennessee guidelines. They have oversight responsibility and have approved our contract with the city and the conference center. The city will meet the reporting deadlines of both federal and state governments, as well as the GFOA Certificate of Achievement Program. And in our opinion, it does meet the requirements to receive another certificate. Moving on to our required communications. In order to perform the audit, we're required to be independent with respect to the city and the conference center, and I can confirm to you that we are independent, both under the rules of the AICPA as well as the government auditing standards. On the bottom is the engagement personnel that worked on your audit. This year, David Hunt is a concurring reviewer. John David Cage served as a supervisor, and Jane Nutter was a senior. And they were on both audits. On page 3, as your auditors, we have certain responsibilities under U.S. Generally Accepted Auditing Standards and the Uniform Guidance in performing your audit. It's important to note that our responsibilities are to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstated statements and fairly presented in accordance with U.S. GAAP. I say reasonable but not absolute, as we do sample transactions to test. We are not testing 100% of the transactions of the city or the conference center, as is directed under the U.S. audit standards. If we were to test 100%, we would be here all year, frankly. Because we are not testing 100% of the transactions, there is a risk that there is a material misstatement that we did not detect during our audit procedures. However, we do test enough that we feel comfortable that the numbers are fairly stated. In planning and performing our audit, we also consider the city's internal control over financial reporting in order to determine our audit procedures. However, we are not providing an opinion over the internal control. We are also issuing a report under the government auditing standards, which we also refer to as the Yellow Book. And in that report, we would report any financial statement findings that we may have. And then also under the Uniform Guidance Report, that is over our testing over the major programs for the federal funding. And we had 4 programs this year. Included in the financial statements are accounting estimates. Some of these are significant, and I have listed the most significant here. They include the property taxes receivable and the related deferred inflows or resources, any allowance on the doubtful receivables, the useful lives and valuation of capital assets, valuation of donated capital assets, primarily streets, fair value of any derivative financial statements, which includes the swap, which was paid off on July 1st, as well as the investments. The appropriateness of the assumptions used to calculate both the pension and the OPEB obligations, and valuation of certain investments that are included in the fiduciary pension fund. We look at management's estimates on an annual basis, and we have determined that they are reasonable. Included in Note 1 in your financial statements are the accounting policies that management has adopted. We also look at these annually, and per our audit procedures, we have determined that they are both appropriate and comprehensive under U.S. GAAP. Audit adjustments for the city, we did not have any audit adjustments, which is excellent. Particularly when you look at the financial statements, you can see how many transactions are occurring. So that's quite significant. We did have some audit adjustments for the conference center, and I have included those in Appendix A for you to look at. We had no discussions with management regarding any alternative accounting treatments. This would be if there weren't any authoritative guidance for any of the transactions that are occurring. All the transactions for the city, there is authoritative guidance for, so it was not necessary for us to have any of those conversations. We're not aware of any management consultations with other independent accountants. You are, of course, welcome to speak with other independent accountants to gain their opinion on any accounting or audit standards. If there is a treatment that we may have a disagreement on, we ask that we be involved in those conversations so all relevant facts and circumstances can be considered in them providing their opinion. We had no disagreements with management. For the purpose of this audit, that would define a disagreement with management as a matter that we could not resolve regarding any financial accounting, reporting, or auditing matters. And we do commonly have discussions on how things should be treated, and we're always able to come to the same place on how those should be treated. Any issues discussed prior to retention of independent auditors were not a condition to our retention. This could potentially cause an independence issue, and there was nothing like that occurred. We encountered no difficulties in performing our audit. Management is very timely in providing us with our requests. They answer our questions promptly and completely and are transparent with everything that we may ask about during the audit. We are not aware of any fraud or illegal acts that occurred during the year, and none were disclosed to us by management. Our areas of audit emphasis I've listed in the middle of page 7. These are the primary areas where we spent quite a bit of time during our audit. We do cover quite a bit of the financial statements in our audit procedures. Other procedures performed include uniform guidance. The city's federal expenditures exceed $750,000, so they were required to have a uniform guidance audit where we select major programs to test for 14 compliance requirements under that guidance. Total federal programs during the fiscal year 2021 were $53.8 million, and we had 4 major programs. They included the Highway Planning and Construction Cluster, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the Capitalization Grants for Clean Water State Revolving Funds, and the Federal Transit Cluster. These are included on the schedule of federal expenditures, which I'll point out when I go through the financial statements. And we had no material exceptions in our testing. On page 8 is recent accounting pronouncements. I met with management before we started the audit. They have gone through all of these, have really planned ahead. They understand what applies to them and how to implement these standards, which the GASB has been implementing at a furious pace. So they're doing a good job of staying on top of those. I've included in Appendix B the management representation letter for the City of Franklin, which we requested from management. I'll send that out to them this week or next week. That's included for you. What management is representing is that they believe the financial statements are materially stated under U.S. GAAP, and they've provided us with all the relevant information we need to do our audit. We've also completed our audit of the conference center at Cool Springs. We have an unmodified opinion on their financial statements as well. And I have included their management representation letter in Appendix C. For Appendix A, these are the audit adjustments that we had for the conference center. I do want to point out the adjustments that relate to the capital assets, which are adjustments 1, 2, 5, and 6. The conference center has asked us to make those adjustments every year, and that's why those are there and why they recur annually. And that's part of the understanding of the engagement, and we're happy to prepare those for them. Appendix B is the management representation letter that goes to city management. And then Appendix C is the representation letter that'll go to the conference center. Are there any questions before I move on to the financial statements? Okay. I'm going to start with the city's annual comprehensive financial report first, which we like to shorten and call the ACFR. One thing I'm going to go through, this is a very large report. I'm going to start with the table of contents so you can understand everything that's being reported, what management is responsible for, and what we provide an opinion on. Management has prepared this report. Margaret Wilson did the heavy lifting on the preparation, and she does an excellent job. Is she here? Right there. She does this is a complicated report, and she does a great job. Mike and Christine review it, and they do a great job as well. Once I get to it and I do my review, my comments are very minimal. So that is excellent. There's several sections to this report, starting with the introductory section. Included in that is a letter of transmittal, and also in the financial section underneath our audit report is the management discussion and analysis. These two really complement the financial statements, and I highly recommend reading those. They give a lot of additional information on the financial statements, and just provides really good information. On the introductory section, they are required to be included in here, but I do not provide an opinion on those. For any report that we do not provide an opinion on, we do read it. We do, if there's financial information in it, such as for the management discussion analysis, we do compare it to the financial statements to make sure that they tie out and make sure that all the information makes sense and doesn't contradict anything that's reported throughout the financial statements. In the financial section, the independent auditor's report, that's what we provide as your auditors. And in the internal control and compliance section, the independent auditor's report under government auditing standards and the uniform guidance, we provide those two letters, and the rest of it is prepared by management. In the basic financial statements, we opine on all of these statements, so our unmodified opinion includes all of these. They are broken out by government-wide financial statements, which is full GAAP, and then we have the fund financial statements, which is what management will present to you during your meetings, and those are unmodified accrual. The supplementary information, that includes a lot of information on your pension and OPEB, which is provided to management by the actuaries. We do not provide an opinion on those, and as well as the statistical section. We do, on the combining and individual fund statements and schedules, those find the combining governmental funds, the non-major funds, and the budget reports. In the supplementary schedules, pages 107 to 114, that is included in our unmodified opinion. We are not providing an opinion on pages 115 through 119. And we are opining on page 146, the schedule of bond and note indebtedness. So with that, we did include the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. That is included in your financial statement for last year's report. As Mike said, that's the 30th year. That is quite an accomplishment and is reflective of management's commitment to excellent reporting. On page 3 is our opinion, which has several sections to it. Management's responsibility for the financial statements. Management is responsible for preparing and presenting properly the financial statements. Our responsibility, as noted under the auditor's responsibility paragraph, is to provide an opinion, which we have in the next paragraph. That's our unmodified opinion. Under other matters, this talks about the other schedules and what we are providing an opinion on and what we are not. And then the other reporting required by government auditing standards, that is referring to the report in the back. On page 20 is the statement of net position. And page 23 is a statement of activities. These are your government-wide financial statements. And as I mentioned, they are presented on the full GAAP basis. That means it includes all the long-term assets and long-term liabilities of the city, so the capital assets. I wanted to point out in infrastructure, there were some alleyways and access that were added to the infrastructure assets. They were discovered and added during 2021, but we did go back and restate 2020, so they are included in there. I'm on page 20. So that 523 million under 2020 includes 19.5 million of alleys that were added. And the city used the GIS developed data to value those alleys. They applied amounts based on performance bonds. Those are also included on page 21 under net position, the net investment in capital assets in that 600 million, those are included in there. And net position, one item that's really important is that all these net position amounts are in a positive position, which they are by quite a bit. So they're doing a great job. In the governmental activities, which that includes the governmental funds, total net position is 697 million. For the business type activities, which is the proprietary funds, that's your water and sewer funds, the net position is 230 million for a total of 928 million. In the statement of activities, this is presented with the expenses listed first. At the top is the governmental activities, and then the program revenues. There's charges for services, which primarily come from sanitation and stormwater, operating grants, and then capital grants and contributions. And then general revenues is listed at the bottom. That's going to include primarily your taxes. The change in net position for the government-wide is 32 million for the governmental activities, 8.9 million for the business type, for a total of 41 million. And then page 24 is your funds, starting with your governmental funds. I want to point out, this is broken out by your major funds, which that includes your general fund, the capital project fund, the road impact fee fund, and the debt service fund. And then your non-major are summarized in the other governmental. The fund balances are included below. Those are also all in a positive position. The general fund balance is 65.4 million. Total of all of them is 153.9. And these fund financial statements are presented on the modified accrual basis. What that means is using they're reporting current resources and uses of those resources, which the city has defined as 60 days. And that is included in the footnotes. That's disclosed there. On page 25, this is the reconciliation between the government-wide and the fund balance sheet. And those reconciling items include capital assets, long-term debt, as well as unavailable revenue for taxes. On page 26 is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances for all the funds. On page 27, you can see the net changes in fund balance for the general fund was 12.2 million for 2021, which is excellent. If you recall, for 2020, it pretty much broke even. I believe it was 14,000. That was caused by some one-time COVID grant funding that the city received, as well as increased local sales taxes, increased from the prior year. There was an increase in activity. And also there was an increase, a 0.5 increase in the sales tax from Williamson County that the city started to receive in April. There was also in the expenditures, cost containment. related to the 2021 budget. This was due to a lot of uncertainty that was felt from the COVID pandemic, so those expenses were, had a lot of cost controls in those expenses in the current year. The non-major that are included in the other governmental, those statements are behind the RSI, which starts on page 94. The balance sheet is on page 94, and on page 95 are the other non-major funds, the combining statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances. I do want to point out the hotel motel tax fund, with the ongoing pandemic and the hospitality industry still feeling the effects of the pandemic, they did experience a loss of $1.5 million for this year. There was also a loss last year. That is expected to rebound in the coming years, but there's still some uncertainty on the timing of when that will occur. Is there any questions on the funds or their purpose? On the non-major, there is a summary of these funds on page 93.
Alderman, any questions? No questions.
And on page 29, that's going to reconcile the income statements for the government-wide and the fund financial statements. The proprietary funds start on page 39. There are no reconciling items between the proprietary funds and the business type activities. They are both presented on the full GAAP basis. And then after that is the fiduciary fund. These are the pension fund assets. And that's for the Franklin Employees Pension Plan. That is, the city has two plans. They have this plan, which is a closed plan. It was closed in 2016 to any new employees. Then they also have another plan with the TCRS, which is with any employees who entered after that date. Page 45 starts the footnotes, which it gives a lot more detail on the balances that are included in the financial statements. There's a couple footnotes I did want to point out. On page 79, under risks and uncertainties, the city is starting to recover from the pandemic. We are still including for all of our clients that uncertainty footnote. It is still ongoing, which means financial results are a little bit more unpredictable. So that's why that is included there. And also there's subsequent events which we're just disclosing. These are events that have occurred after year end, but between our report date that are important to make mention in the footnotes. There's issuance of water and sewer bonds as part of the upgrade of the sewers wastewater treatment plant. 10 million in water and sewer revenue bonds. And also state revolving loans was an additional draw of 19.5 million. And we're also disclosed 4 new aldermen were elected in October. In the required supplementary information,
Trust me, that's the only way you want to make the audit.
yeah.
I'll save this one.
Yeah. Never again will you appear in the audit. Except on the cover page.
Yeah. On page 83, this gives more information on the pension plans. If you're interested in the funded status, there's 2 schedules. The first one is for the City of Franklin Employees Pension Plan. That's the plan that is closed to new employees. And this, the funded status is towards the bottom. For 2021, it's 82.8%, which is really good. And above that, you can see the total pension liability and the activity during the year that caused that amount to change, as well as in the net position, those assets that are backing that liability. The net pension liability, that $28.4 million, that's included on your government-wide financial statements as a long-term liability. On page 84, those are the cash contributions that the city has been made for that pension plan for 21 through 2015. And page 86 is for the new plan under TCRS. Since that plan's newer, the liability and the assets backing those are less at this time, but that will continue to grow. The total liability is just over $2 million. There's $1.9 million in assets being held to pay out that liability. So the net pension asset at year end is $80,000. As of year end, it's 96% funded. And that gives a history of the funding there. And on the next page is the contributions to that plan, which was just under $500,000 for 21. The city also has an OPEB plan. The OPEB plan works a little bit different. There are no assets that are pooled to and related to that liability, which is very common. Most cities do not have investments to pay out that liability. They're on a pay-as-you-go basis. For the city, and that's also why it's called a total OPEB liability as opposed to a net pension liability for the pension plan. For the city, that total liability is $22.1 million at year end. The contributions that were made were for the benefit payments that were made in 21, and those were $430,000. So that's the amount of cash that's being contributed. Okay, I'm page 151. This is our Yellow Book report under Government Auditing Standards. This discusses our results regarding the controls over the financial statements, and if we had any findings, they would be reporting here. This report also states that we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, nor did we have any findings over the internal control over the financial statements. We are reporting one finding that's required to be reported by the State of Tennessee Audit Manual, which is referenced as finding 2021-001 in the Schedule of Findings and Question Costs. And you are well-versed on this finding. It's regarding the City of Franklin Fire Chief and the excessive mileage and the violation of the working out-of-state policy for travel. The Comptroller's Office did an investigative report for this, and they issued it to management. They also shared it with us. Per the state of Tennessee's requirements, we're required to also report this in our report, and that's why you're seeing it again. Management has included their corrective action plan, and it has been corrected. So that's included for you on page 161. On page 155 is our report over the uniform guidance. We do provide an opinion over the compliance requirements. And we had 4 major programs, and we had an unmodified over each program. On page 159, this summarizes our results on that. The major programs are listed here: the Federal Transit Cluster, the Highway Planning and Construction, Coronavirus Relief Fund, and the State Revolving Fund. I need to go back to the CFA. On page 107, this is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or as we also call it, the CFA. This lists all the federal grants that the city received and had expenditures on during the fiscal year ended 2021. A few things I want to point out. At the bottom, under Environmental Protection Agency, that's the state revolving funds that were received. They received $48 million during the year. That's the loans for the water reclamation plant that's being constructed. Previously, we had reported that on the schedule of state financial assistance, which is the schedule on the next page. Management, as well as us, learned this year. We had both previously been told that that was state funding, because it does come from the state of Tennessee. They informed us, and we had confirmed that each year. They informed us this year that we should assume it's federal. So that's why that is moved from the state schedule to the federal schedule. Under the uniform guidance, we're not allowed, when we discover that something should have been on the federal schedule, we're not allowed to just move forward. We have to go back. So we, from 2018 through 2021, we have audited all those state revolving funds. It was approximately $100 million worth of loans that the city has received. We had no findings over those. The city has done a good job of complying with those compliance requirements. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and we will be reissuing our reports over that because we had to go back. So just wanted to make you aware of that. And that's also, the capital assets will also be updated to be included in those reports. So. I also want to say what a great job that the city is doing. I know Margaret Martin always asks every year, how's the city doing? I miss that question, and they're doing an amazing job. And you know, they got a lot going on. They are committed to doing a great job and committed to financial reporting. So we are very pleased. They're great to work with. So, any questions on the financials? I know I went through a very large report very quickly.
I only have one. The $10 million revenue, I would have thought that we would have borrowed that after July 1st. Did we do that?
No, we actually closed on the $10.6 million
Yeah.
water and sewer loan. We closed on September the 15th.
Okay.
So that is in fiscal year '22, and that was why when Jennifer was pointing out the subsequent event note, we disclosed to the readers of this document that we had borrowed money since since the end of the fiscal year, but all of the details of that loan will be in the next year's audit. But we did disclose that the bond issue did occur, and it closed subsequent to the fiscal year ending, but before today's date.
In layman's terms, the fact that the state revolving loan money is at a different entity giving it, does that make any difference? Repayment schedule, anything, the interest stays the same,
Oh.
repayment schedule stays, all of that stays the same?
On a cash basis, what we pay, the interest rate, when that was approved by the state of Tennessee's funding, local funding board, that was a committed loan to us. State revolving loan programs have been around for a long time, and certainly other states have those as well, but the guidance that changed for us to record that as federal money versus state money, technically that pot of money is a combination of both. Most of it historically has been federal, but it's given to the states to be responsible and make sure that we borrow it correctly and use it for the purposes that they want us to use it for. So in some ways, the reporting is separate from truly how we're going to be using that for the wastewater treatment plant project. And we'll be still repaying it in the same terms that we agreed to with the state funding board.
Any other questions? Mayor?
Yeah, if I could, I wanted to go to page 119, which has to do with unaccounted for water loss, and that's a little different form than we normally read. If you could just kind of quickly go through that. And I think it's also important for new aldermen to understand that every drop of water we make doesn't necessarily get to the end of the faucet, so.
Yeah.
And maybe that score too, 84 out of 100. The report looks worse than 84 out of 100.
I guess I have a different perspective on that. I think that's a good score. But I can understand why
What
someone
I'm saying
may.
is that the score looks better than what the numbers,
Oh,
whenever I
okay.
go flipping
I
through
see
the
what you're
numbers.
saying. So this report, it's really, is prepared by the water department. And as you can see on there, it is unaudited. We don't verify those numbers because they're very difficult to verify. But what this is reporting is the water that is used by the city during the year. I don't know if you want to give more information on that.
And I would give a little background. I'm not the engineer, but I'll play a little bit of perspective, though, is that certainly in any water utility, not, as the mayor was just saying, not every drop of water is billed to a customer, but there's actually two types of non-billed water. There is such as hydrant flushing. There is water that is used that we account for, and we can keep up with accounted for but non-billed water. But then there's also unaccounted for and unbilled. And that's part of what this schedule that the state, actually the comptroller's office reviews every year is, and they have all of this elaborate formula to get to a validity score, as Jennifer was saying, that, and as she looks at these through many of her clients, that there are certainly, part of what they're getting at is they want to make sure that that you are keeping up and you realize how much not only unbilled, accounted for water that you have, but what's unaccounted for and unbilled. Because if you have a water system that has a significant amount of unaccounted for, unbilled water, then there is a true cost to your system for that.
Yeah, so just because it's not billed does not mean it's not known. It's used in ways that don't result in a billing. We do, though, systematically review our water lines throughout the system and go on a regular basis where we televise and then we go in and repair any leaks that we have and those kind of things to get at what is the true loss of water in any system. And obviously the older elements of our system are the first priority areas because that's where you're likely to see loss from older infrastructure. So this is a kind of a standardized form. It doesn't always tell you the whole story. It's ripe for misinterpretation, so it's helpful to highlight that for you. But overall, we have a good system that helps us track the usage of water and the maintenance of the system on a regular, systematic basis.
And we also have a great program for leak detection. To monitor and find those leaks, and there's money allocated in the budget every year for finding those leaks, so.
Does that reflect on the wastewater department any way? And I don't even know why I would think that it would.
Well, the state of Tennessee regulates water and wastewater systems in a couple of different ways. There's, of course, the Tennessee Department of Environmental Conservation, TDEC, in which we have our permits through, and there's all the environmental regulations through TDEC, but then also the Comptroller's Office through the Water and Wastewater Board regulates municipal water systems and wastewater systems such as Franklin. And when they review annually every single one of these systems, the financial, almost like a tabletop review, and they are looking for One measure is that you're not allowed in Tennessee to have a negative change in net position 2 consecutive years. That's something that you're not allowed to do in Tennessee. And as well as they are also looking at this validity score, which is a backdoor way to look at what your unaccounted for water loss is. So there is lots of regulation on our water and wastewater systems, and that's happening on an ongoing basis.
Any other questions or comments? Jennifer?
All right, thank you. I'll move on to the conference center's financial statements. On page 4, again, I want to point out our opinion, which is also unmodified, or a clean opinion. In the statement of net position, in the statement of revenue expenses and changes in net position, these are also fully accrued, just so you're aware. The largest asset held by the conference center are the capital assets. It's the center itself, all the furniture included within, which was $9.8 million at year end compared to $10.1 in the previous year. That's primarily depreciation on those assets. In the cash, they had $574,000. It did decrease from $738 in the previous year. They have restricted certain amounts of their cash for capital expenditure. That's so they can use those for repairs and any additions or renovations towards the center for upkeep. And then their unrestricted cash was $131,000 a year and compared to $254 in the previous year. That's primarily due to the decrease in events and activity during the year, which, as you're well aware, the pandemic has had significant effect on the conference center and their operations the past couple of years. Net position, primarily $10.4 million, $9.8 million of it is invested in capital assets. That restricted net position is the restricted cash, and then unrestricted is $216,000, which did increase slightly from $213 in the prior year, and those have remained positive the past 2 years. In the operating revenue, and this is really where you're going to see the impact. Operating revenue, $1.8 million compared to $5.5 in the prior year. So the pandemic started in March of 2020, so they did have 9 months of, I wouldn't call normal, pretty standard activity. And then when the shutdown occurred, after that, they came to a halt. In 2021, the first 2 quarters, there was very little for events. They did start to rebound as vaccines were introduced and those restrictions were lifted. They had $1.8 million in the current year, and that is expected to fluctuate depending on how these variations go and all that. But once the pandemic subsides, they are expected to go back to normal activity. In their operating expenses, there was some cost controls in order to keep those expenses to a minimum. Total operating expenses were 2.9 compared to 5.6 in the prior year. There are a couple of expenses which are more fixed, the catering management fee and the management fees, as well as depreciation, which is a non-cash expense. So those remained similar. The remaining there were cost control measures put in place with a lot of those expenses, particularly for employees, are allocated, and with there not being events, those did not get allocated to the conference center. Operating loss was $1.1 million for 21 compared to $124 for 2020. Other income, that's primarily from cancellations. Contributions or distributions from the local governments. This is a joint venture between the city and Williamson County. When the conference center has operating income, that operating income gets split 50/50 and distributed to the city and the county. When they are at a loss, the city and the county contribute to the conference center. So those totaled $593,000. For '21, the city would have contributed half that amount. Total decrease in net position, $369,000. Net position was still strong at $10.4 million. Let's see. In the footnotes, those management agreements, the operating and the catering agreement are discussed in footnote D. And there's a franchise agreement too on page 20 before that. And those are primarily fixed. Also in footnote E, discusses related party transactions. There are some related party transactions between the hotel and the conference center. There are expenses that are allocated. There's also activity with the city and county with the distributions that are disclosed there as well. In footnote F, on page 22, that risk management, that's that same uncertainty footnote with the pandemic, which conference centers certainly felt. And in the management discussion analysis in the front, I did skip over that. They do talk about going forward and how they are expected to rebound once this pandemic calms down. We have also included our Yellow Book report. The conference center does not receive federal funding, so that we do not have a uniform guidance report related to them, but we do issue a Yellow Book report. We do not have any findings for the conference center. Their financial statement controls are running well, so we have no findings. We have no compliance findings, and there were no findings in the previous year. If there are previous findings, we do follow up on those. So.
Any questions? I do have one. We made a contribution to the conference center. So that's, but probably we've never done that before.
This was, I believe, the second year in the
One other
22
time.
years or so that the conference center, full years, that I think there was actually a loss right when it got started in a partial year, and then there was one other year 14, 15 years ago. But this is really the second full year. And is your question where that contribution's recorded on the city's side?
Yes.
That's in the hotel motel fund. That is, and that's where we record the distributions that had in prior years had come into the city. And certainly, something that we'll be talking about at the end of this meeting is that we are seeing distributions once again from the conference center back to the city, and we're recording those monies back into the hotel motel fund. So the benefits from the center get recorded, but then this one year we did have to record expense to the hotel motel fund.
And just as the positive cash flow is split equally between city and county when a contribution is required, it's also split between city and county.
I'm just not ever, I don't ever remember that coming up before. But if it's been 14 years, I mean, that's
I
not.
think we had a budget amendment that accommodated.
Did we?
I'm not sure, is that? I'm
Long
pretty
time
sure, but
ago.
yeah, we'd have to go back and look at.
That's not, I mean, I was just curious when that comment was made because I was.
It is rare. It has
It
been
is rare.
rare in, I believe, '99 was the first year for the conference center, and it is rare that the city has had to make contributions.
It's rare that we have to do that, but it's unique that we are in the position that we have positive cash flow from a facility like this compared to other communities across the country. It just is typically something you're contributing to because it's an asset that brings other benefits in your community, and it's just part of your operational expenses. And we've been fortunate that in all but 2 full years, we've been able to have positive cash flow from this operation.
Yeah, they do bring in quite a few events. during normal times. I think they're full most of the time, so, and it's certainly in an area of Franklin that brings a lot of traffic, so.
Alderman Baggett.
It is, my eye was drawn to the insurance page on page 24. And seeing that this is on the assets, the building is listed as a $12.3 million asset, yet it's covered for $8.5 million. That might be something to, I know there's ways you calculate the asset value on the financial statement that will differ from what it costs to rebuild, but that's a pretty big gap. And there may be an explanation, but might be worth looking into. The cost of construction as well, going up.
It's a good point.
So we're only talking about the conference center itself, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
The structure.
Yes.
I think that's something we're certainly happy to look into, Alderman Baggett. That's certainly, it's on any sort of property and casualty insurance these days, looking at replacement costs. Because that, and what you also mentioned was certainly the requirements for, underneath there's an accounting statement and how we book our assets, that really it's not related to replacement cost at all. And so we do follow those guidance for placing the assets on the books, and we have to depreciate it. But that is not at any way tied to how much it would cost to rebuild if we had to.
Any other questions of Jennifer? We appreciate your time, and we appreciate the report, and certainly the goodness that came out of the report.
Very good results.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it goes without saying, but it needs to be said. Having clean opinions every year, we sort of take for granted, but it is not a small task, and there's a lot of work that happens throughout the organization, but especially with our finance team, and we are glad of that, proud of that, and I just want to thank everybody who put so much into that to help us get there. And thank you, Jennifer, for your team's work.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to item 6 then, which is consideration of draft resolution 2021-166, an organizational chart change for the Franklin Police Department. Who wishes to present that? Michael?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget and Finance Committee, good afternoon. My name is Michael Walters-Young. I'm your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager. The next two items are what we call cleanups. They are very small in nature, but we want to get them in front of you. Alderman Baggett, our practice is to bring any organizational chart change or staffing change to this committee first and have an initial vetting before it goes up for a vote to the full board. So therefore, there's time to ask any questions and see if there's any issues. This is a very, very minor change. There are no monetary impacts of it. It moves a couple of positions from one division to the other. The police department has 3 operational divisions: administration, patrol, and criminal investigations. We change one authorized detective into one authorized police officer, and we change the title of the parking enforcement officer to what you'll see on the car and on the uniform now, our parking ambassador. Patrolling around the downtown area.
Let me cut this off.
We fundamentally believe that everyone should have an enjoyable experience in downtown Franklin. If there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, we would appreciate your support in advancing it to the full board.
Any questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I recommend that I move that we recommend this to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Proper
Sorry.
motions are a second.
Second.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that, so we'll save that one then. Let's go to item 7, which is consideration of draft resolution 2021-167, 2022, a resolution to amend the organizational chart of the Administrative Department of the City of Franklin.
I'll speak quickly to that since that's one of my areas of responsibility. We have a couple changes there. We have a modification in a job title related to the board recording secretary to a records technician position. We'll be losing Linda at the end of the year, so we'll miss her. And Casey is our new records technician, so we've got a little bit of crossover to help with that. And we have modified the position somewhat, and Casey will be taking on some other responsibilities as well in that position. And then our deputy city recorder, that position is moving from a pay grade E to a pay grade F, and we've also provided some supervisory responsibility with that position. That's the position Angie is in at this point. So all fairly minor changes and all work within the existing budget. So it's the same thing. It's entirely an organizational chart change and a pay grade change for the one position.
Any questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I move we recommend this to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Proper motion or a second?
Second?
Proper motion and a second. Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Let's go to item 8 then. Consideration of Amendment 2 to the City of Franklin Contract Number 2021-0317, a service termination agreement dated November the 26th, 2008, between the City of Franklin, Tennessee and Mallory Valley Utility District of Williamson County.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So the Mallory Valley Utility District has proposed an agreement, an amendment to the agreement, the service termination agreement. And just to highlight a few things, the original service termination agreement was entered into in 2008. The first amendment was signed in 2009, so it's been 12 years since we've reviewed or revised this agreement. They have asked for an additional $350 in the monthly fee that we pay them. And then currently, in addition to paying the monthly fee, there's also a $30 per disconnect fee that's passed on to the customer. And there's also a $35 after-hours turn-on fee. This amendment would remove that $35 after-hours turn-on fee, but it would retain the $30 disconnect fee. And like I said, that gets passed on to the customer. Let's see. It also, the amendment defines the cutoff time as 11 a.m. So there's a hard and fast deadline for those fees to be added and for cutoffs to initiate, which staff feels having a defined time is better for staff and customers alike, and that it makes the application of the fees more equitable. And it's not, staff is not relying on back and forth communication throughout the day trying to determine who's paid and where the service techs are, who's been cut off. There's a deadline, and if you haven't paid, you get that fee added. The changes would be effective July 1st, so we would ask for the additional money in our FY23 budget. And I guess I would just say that a 35% increase in a monthly fee that hasn't changed in a 12-year period seems reasonable. But moreover, we're very satisfied with the service that we get from Mallory Valley. They provide monthly billing data to us, leak adjustment information, new customer service applications, and a host of other documentation. They're very easy to work with and quick to assist whenever we need it, and we enjoy this good working relationship with them. So at the end of the day, we feel it's the right move and also, most importantly, beneficial to our mutual customers.
Then I'll entertain a motion to approve, to move to the full board.
Motion to approve to move to the full board.
Proper motion to a second.
Second.
And I do have, do you have, go into an explanation just a little bit. Does that affect the sewer rates
No, sir.
any?
There's about
The cutoffs?
3,600 customers, about 3,600 of our wastewater customers are also water customers in Mallory Valley. And so those customers, they right now, they say certainly they pay a water bill to Mallory Valley, they pay us for their wastewater. And their fees for the city wastewater are, the same as what the board sets. You set for all of our wastewater customers a rate schedule. However, as Jessica was describing, because the water meters are owned by Mallory Valley, that's the data that we have to get on a monthly basis from, because we bill wastewater off of meter data that is the water usage. So for these 3,600 customers, we are dependent upon Mallory Valley to supply not only the applications with the customers' information, but their monthly water usage, and that's what we are billing. And certainly, once we, if for the really small number of customers who do not pay within the 60 days, and we have to initiate disconnection, the disconnection's on the water meter, because on sewer, there's not a meter to turn off. So having Mallory Valley be a participant with us to make sure that those fees are paid, it's a benefit to our wastewater system that those customers are paying as well. But we're fortunate it's a small number, but because of Mallory Valley's, and Mallory Valley is following all state regulations. We confirm that with them.
And we should say that the other water utility districts provide a lot of, big percentage of the number of people in the city of Franklin. They really do. And so it's just so, we're the sewer provider, but we're not necessarily the water provider for nearly all the people in Franklin.
And that's also a factor of the areas that are growing with new construction are in areas that are served by water districts. The increase in customers in the city of Franklin water system year over year is very small, because it may be a lot here or there. There's just not as much available land to add new customers in the city of Franklin water district.
Any other questions? Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, item 9, which is consideration of City of Franklin Resolution number 2021-172, a resolution authorizing and directing the Industrial Development Board of the City of Franklin to prepay in full its taxable tax increment revenue refunding bonds, Series 2015A, variable rate for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. Mayor, I think they wrote that up for you to read.
Sounds about long enough for me. Yeah, maybe about another paragraph would help, Alderman Barnhill.
We'll try to get it on.
Yeah. I'm just giving you a little dose of what I have to do sometimes.
But this is really a great one. This is a great thing. So, so enjoy it.
Christine?
Thank you. This is the fifth fiscal year in a row that we have asked the Budget and Finance Committee to recommend to the full board prepaying. And this time, the difference is that we're asking you to recommend prepaying in full a loan that was a refinancing from 2015, originally issued in 2005, known as the tax increment financing loan. And these are property taxes based on the incremental increases in value in a certain tax district, primarily around the I-65 Cool Springs corridor area, around a Nissan building, but there's a lot more in that district than certainly that one campus. And beginning 5 years ago, in fiscal 18, the property taxes generated in that district exceeded the annual debt service requirements for the loan. And we came back beginning in 2018 and asked the board to start prepaying the debt service or the principal payments on that 2015 refinancing. And since then, for the last 4 fiscal years, $3.2 million in total has been prepaid. And once the property, this year's property taxes were billed, we do receive a report from the county trustee on what are those values, tax values that are due February 28th, and that is just over $2.6 million for this fiscal year. And at that point, I knew we were close to repaying that loan. I asked it's now Truist Bank, to formerly BB&T, for a payoff. This recommendation, we're asking for a prepayment to pay in full of $800,000. Certainly with debt, sometimes we do have to ask for authorization, and then we come back to this committee and report. If that authorization is given to staff and officers, we come back and report to this committee. The prepayment will probably be just a little under $800,000, but given the variables of the actual prepayment date and all, $800,000 would be on the outside what we would need to repay this loan in full. It was due for final maturity in 2025, so we'll pay it off a little over 3 years early. We also, for the time, and this is a little earlier than this committee sees this request, but we do have a report that's due every year at the end of January to the state of Tennessee for reports on debt that's issued through industrial development boards. And given how close we are to being done with this loan, I would ask that this committee go ahead and consider advancing this to the full board so that we can repay this before that report is filed mid to late January. So when you're refinancing or not refinancing, but certainly prepaying with cash, there's not nearly as many steps involved as a refinancing with bonds, but it is something that we have to, certainly you have to authorize, and then we will go through the necessary steps and report back to you.
And after this, all that money just goes into our property tax. It's no longer required to pay off anything. I mean, because for many years, we just paid, a certain amount of money on it. But it was because all the things out in this area were developing. And so the property tax that they paid was much greater once they developed, but it's still very impressive, and I'm delighted.
Well, it certainly is. We do have a couple more mechanics left for this loan, because in the early years of the 2005 loan, the city actually had to advance the interest and principal payments that were due from our city's general fund, because, of course, the timing of that 2005 loan, the initial years were, the growth just didn't occur as quickly due to the economic factors. And we do report every year what that amount of what is due to the city's general fund, which in some cases this is an accounting exercise, but for 6/30/2021, the tax increment financing district does owe the city's general fund $2,304,000 from those early advances in debt service. So we will reduce that at the end of fiscal year 22, probably $800,000 to $900,000 once we get all of these mechanics worked through on repaying the debt, and we'll reduce this amount due to the city. Then in fiscal year 23, we will finish that accounting out. And then that way for fiscal 24, the tax increment financing district will not exist at all. It will go straight into property taxes. So we will repay the general fund over this year and next year, and then the accounting mechanism will be able to exhaust itself.
It is pretty great.
It is
to be
great.
at this point. This is something we've all talked about for years and years, and it was a wise investment by the city that helped encourage private investment in our community. In the fact that over the last several years, it's put in additional money that we've been able to move this expiration date up each year, and now we're to the point where we can completely retire it. Is a big milestone. We ought to be proud of that, and it's a big achievement.
So Alderman Peterson, I see you smiling.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's been waiting to make
Because
Right.
we've been waiting every year for several years now.
I move that we send it to the Board of Aldermen with a recommendation for approval.
Proper motion and a second.
Second.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. by. Only other question is, will this be on the meeting? Do we get this in time to be on the meeting for?
Yes, our city attorney has, she
Next
has
Tuesday.
approved the form of the, and our bond counsel has also reviewed the resolution, and we're ready to go to the full board.
Okay. Item 10, discussion regarding employee compensation.
I'll jump in on this, and we're bringing this back because we talked about this at work session. In a normal circumstance, we would have brought this to this committee first and then to the full board, but the way schedules and the meeting laid out, and also the timing for this recommended action, had us do it a little bit backwards. So I won't go through the whole presentation, but I will hit some highlights. If we could bring the presentation up and go to slide 2. This is, and I won't rehash everything, but I'll hit the key points. And this slide gives a good overview summary. The labor market itself is tight and tightening, and we're conscious of our competitive position within it. The unemployment rate in the city of Franklin, the last report we had, is at 2%, which is pretty near, if not the all-time low that we have seen in any of our recent memory that we've seen for our city. So it means it is a tight market, a challenging market. The region is also pretty tight as well, so that's a factor. The other element we've seen is our vacancy rate as a city, as an organization, is higher than it has normally been. We budget with an assumption of 3.5%. The historical data is somewhere around 5%, and our actual experience at this point is right around 10%. So it's higher. So that is another manifestation of the market is tighter, it's harder to attract and retain folks. So that is another thing that we're looking at. Then we also look at the impact on our existing team members, and that inflation is a real factor. And we've seen over the last 6 months a 5.5% inflationary rate. That impacts our team members and the costs that they have in living and in getting here to work. 80% of our employee team lives outside of the city of Franklin, so there's a commute involved and other expenses, and we want to be sensitive of that. The positive element is that we have seen significant impact, positive impact in our primary revenue source, local option sales tax. And just in the first 3 months, I believe it's a $1.6 million above budget. 2 million? Okay, 2 months. Thank you. So that is a significant amount that helps us absorb this cost. The cost for what we're recommending, 2.5% cost of living adjustment, is about $720,000, somewhere in that range. So it's well above that, and the trend is continuing. We expect to continue in terms of those positive revenue numbers. There will also be other cost impacts, but our people are our primary expense, but also our primary asset, and we felt we needed to invest in that. As I shared with you when we talked before, we're in the midst of a pay plan review. I really look at this as a down payment towards that pay plan review. We know we will look at these kind of impacts at a minimum and then some when that full report is available to us, and is something that we are going to incorporate in the recommended budget. And I felt like this is a very safe adjustment to make that would not be in any way out of line with what else is coming. That's why I call it a down payment. And this adjustment helps us close the gap, at least somewhat, for our team members. You know, we would like to implement it with the pay period that starts December 26th. That would be the first paycheck that our employees see in January of 2022. And it would help us, again, close that gap, be a real, I think, a positive sign to send to our team members, but also help them deal with impacts they're seeing and help us with retention overall. I want to thank Michael, who highlighted this first. One of the things we do as we prepare for the budget is we look at inflationary impacts, and Michael saw this data, shared it with Christine, Kevin, myself, and as we looked at it, we saw this path really making sense for us in terms of doing something positive for our team members and hopefully helping us address the retention challenge and to be a highly competitive employer, which we always strive to be as well. So I'll stop there. There's other, if you want to delve into any of those specific items, we've got the presentation. We can show you those elements as well, and we're glad to answer any questions. And again, we would normally come to you first and then the whole board, but the schedules just were a little backwards this time around. Yes.
And we're going to, this might be bleed over into our time tomorrow talking about pay scale, and where I'm going to get a good overview. But for those that have just been hired, so like within the year, when they accepted a position at a pay range, and they're, I guess, mid-year getting, 2.5, another 2.5. Do I understand that correct?
Yes, everybody who's on our
Everybody.
payroll,
It's just across the
December
board.
26th is going to get it across the board because the market is moving for everybody. So
Sure.
we felt we wanted to do that kind of equitably for everybody who's with us.
The slide 11 is what I'm looking at. This is distributed by fund. So not all of this will come from the general fund. It will come from, you can,
Correct.
okay.
The vast majority will be in the general fund, probably 85%, something like that? Yeah, so, but, yeah, it will impact primarily general fund, also our water management, sanitation.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, did you want to mention the resolution 2021-176?
Yeah, so we will bring forward the resolution that you have here. The primary thing the board is really doing is moving those pay ranges. So the minimum and maximum of the pay ranges will move 5%. That in and of itself does not change anybody's pay. Then we will implement your direction to do across the board 2.5%. The only place it may impact, and I don't even know that there is anybody in this case, but if somebody fell below the minimum of their pay grade, we would move them up to the minimum. They would keep them within the pay range. So we would make an additional movement to bring them into their minimum if somehow the 2.5% didn't keep them in line with the minimum of their pay grade. Kevin, Christine, Michael, anything else we want to add that I didn't hit?
No, I think you said everything. I think, I don't know if there's anyone that would fall under if it goes up 5%.
I'm not aware of anybody.
I'm not either.
So, just to briefly summarize, you're getting $800,000 from the half-cent sales tax per month, 1.6 million over 2 months. So you're picking up 9.6 million. What was the cost again to implement this portion? Because this is not the whole implementation of what you're looking at doing. This is only base to here. And so we're jumping into this level right here now to pay.
The fiscal year impact is approximately $721,000. Yeah, that's our best estimate. There's always a little bit of change with who's working and
Right.
changes that may happen between now and when we implement it.
But
As the-
worst case scenario.
As
Yes.
the chart shows, however, to your point, Alderman Barnhill, when we look at it, the additional sum of money that you just did, math was spot on, 800,000 a month, or would equal 9.6. The annualized cost
Yes.
is in the middle.
Right.
And that would be for the general fund, 1.2 million.
Okay.
So in that sense, roughly $800,000 a month is what revenues are exceeding expectations right now. To implement this would be $100,000 a month for the general fund.
Any other questions? Now, this does not have, so you don't need a draft, you don't need an ordinance or a resolution with this to go to
We've got a
the,
resolution that will be on the December 14th agenda directly.
so nothing needs to come from us.
That's correct. So the resolution to move the pay grades will be on the meeting of the 14th.
Okay.
The ordinance to actually appropriate these funds is coming up.
It'll be incorporated in the budget amendment, how we pay for it
All right.
component.
Any other questions on the employee compensation discussion? Then let's go to item 11, the consideration of draft ordinance 2021-50, an ordinance to amend the FY 2021-2022 budget. Michael?
To that end, good afternoon again. One of the things that we're going to be doing, because it's been a while and because we do have new members, is when we get to January, we will be doing sort of we'll be doing the revenue model, first of all, to forecast the next year, but we'll also go through your goals, budget goals, as well as a budget process 101, because it's been a while since we've kind of just summarized. And I thought it would be useful when introducing this amendment to kind of take a step back and actually just refamiliarize ourselves with what a budget amendment is and even what a budget is. People who know me know that I can wax poetic about this subject, so I won't do that. I will stick to the glossary of the budget of the city of Franklin. And we define a budget as a comprehensive financial plan of operation for a specific period of time, in this case, July 1 to June 30 every calendar year, that matches planned revenues with expenditures to provide city services. The budget authorizes a series of what we call in government parlance appropriations. An appropriation is an authorization granted by the full board, all of you, to make budgeted expenditures and to incur obligations for specified purposes in budget ordinances. And a budget amendment, which we are considering now, Ordinance 2021-50, is a formal change of those appropriations, up or down or sideways, which requires 3 readings. First reading in this case will be December 14th. If you agree to move this on to the full board, it will get noticed duly in the paper of record, and then the public hearing will be on January 11th. And then third and final reading will be on January 25th, and it will take legal effect on January 26th. So Ordinance 2021-50 really has 5 components. We will go through them as quickly as we can. There are a series of revenue modifications. There's mid-year cost of living adjustments, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because that was literally item 10. Retirement payouts. We have 16 individuals who have either retired or will be retiring by December 31st from the service of the City of Franklin. We offered a one-time vacation sellback opportunity to our employees, and I'll have Eric kind of touch on that, or Kevin touch on that briefly when we get to that at first. And then there's about $700,000 in various expense modifications throughout the 6 funds which this budget amendment covers. Now, to that end, what's a fund? A fund, again, is defined in the glossary, is a fiscal or accounting entity with a self-balancing set of accounts. It is also our legal level of budgetary control within the city of Franklin. This is where governmental accounting, which you've heard a lot about today, and private sector accounting are really different because we utilize funds and the private sector generally does not. And the use of funds are designed to try to create transparency and segregation of certain activities, except for one fund, and that, appropriately enough, is named the general fund. So to that end, the general fund has revenue increases of about $1.8 million. We are increasing local option sales tax by $1.55 million. That accounts for most, but not completely all, of the additional sales tax in above expectations we have received to date. We received very positive news, and I think this was distributed in a weekly update a couple of weeks ago, that the state, the MPO, have awarded us $270,000 for the replacement of 75 traffic signals to advanced transportation controllers. I think I got that right from Jonathan. So that all of our traffic signals can be basically in the same platform at this point, and that will aid our traffic operations center and our traffic engineers in helping to move traffic as efficiently as possible. And that is a 100% grant. There's no match and no cost to the city of Franklin. And then finally, we have received insurance proceeds of about $38,000. We did have an administrative vehicle in the fire department which was involved in an accident. Everyone was good, but the vehicle was totaled and needed to be replaced. You will see an expense which slightly exceeds the insurance proceeds of $42,000 in the next slide. On the expense side, as I said, funds, especially the general fund, must remain in balance at all times in the state of Tennessee. So therefore, if you raise revenues by $1.8 million, you have to raise expenses to match it. About $628,000 is for the cost of living adjustments, which we've already talked about. Retirement payouts are for 15 employees. We are budgeting an estimate of $460,000. Now, retirees are eligible to receive a payout of their entire accrued vacation and up to 120 hours of accrued sick leave when they retire from the city of Franklin. Now, again, they will be paid whatever amount they have accrued or left accrued the day that they actually retire, hence why the parentheses estimate is up there on the screen. The vacation sellback cost in the general fund is roughly $275,000, and I'll let Eric give you a quick reminder of
Yeah, so one of the consequences of the pandemic is it really impacted people's ability to take acquired vacation time. We did some things to allow for additional carryover above policy, but we also saw this as a way to help people manage that and give them a little bit of additional financial benefit as well. I think it's a little under half of our folks that were eligible chose to take advantage of this opportunity. And they had to have a minimum number of vacation hours, so they couldn't tap themselves out to get the sellback benefit. They had to be over 80 hours of accrued vacation. And so this is the number of folks who've opted in. They would receive this payment at the December 17th paycheck. So that's kind of the bottom line final result of that initiative that the board approved. And glad to provide that little bit of benefit to people. Both, it's a nice financial benefit, but it also helps them manage the stress of saying, I have this time I have to use, what am I going to do? And because it became harder to take time off, and we want our people to get at least some benefit. And this was one way to do it, give them a little extra help.
and the
Michael?
Yes, sir.
When we did the retirement payouts, what was the maximum vacation again? The maximum that you
The
could accrue.
vacation is whatever they have accrued.
Right.
The sick time, we allow that we pay out sick time up to, is it 180 or 120 hours? Michael
120.
said 120.
120 is correct.
Yeah, 120, okay. So if they have that in their balance, we will pay that amount, but any hours above that are not paid out.
But we don't stop. We do require them to take vacation. That's just,
But they're able to carry over what they're able to accrue in a year. But vacation is an owed liability to those employees. Sick time is not except for at retirement up to that amount.
but for all of us, I want to make sure that I understand, because you can, if you're doing your last 3 years average salary, and that's what your retirement's based on, you can theoretically, for the lack of a better term, skew the numbers to the point, and I thought we went through that a few years ago, because I remember the one person that did that, and, I mean, Christine, you want to answer my ramblings?
Well, one thing I will mention is that we have, as we've talked about even with our auditor, we have several different we have 2 different pension plans that our full-time employees are covered under, and even within our closed pension plan, there are several different groupings. And in fact, even in the closed plan, there's a group that the pension is based on the highest of their highest 3 years. There's also, I believe, the last group in the closed plan is 5 years. In the state, in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System that our employees that have been hired since January 1st of 17 are under, it's also a 5-year of your highest consecutive salaries. Now, in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System plan, of which we don't have any retirees yet, but we will at some point, you actually are not, you can't do what I think you're referring to as like a spiking, where someone uses this terminal leave to increase the earnings that are eligible for pension contributions. That does not happen in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System. You can certainly pay them, but it doesn't go into pension earnings. And so there's a difference in that semantic and how that is calculated. So it really depends on, right now, I would say most of our, really all of our folks who are retiring right now, full-time people are in that closed pension. They certainly are all in the closed pension. They may be in different groups, whether they're the 3 years or the 5 years for their calculation. But at some point, we'll start having retirees out of the TCRS plan, and they won't have the ability to do any sort of increase of their pension earnings by vacation or sick leave as they leave.
Eric, would it be unreasonable to have a vacation sale back every year?
You'd have to look at that. It would create a financial obligation that
But
we
you
do
got it
not have
anyway.
at this time.
But you got it anyway. You've got it anyway if they take their vacation. If you allow them to accrue their vacation, then you've got to pay it out at the end if they retire. I'm just looking at, if somebody wants to pay back, if somebody needed the money, they wanted to sell a vacation back,
Right.
and they had 80 hours.
And at one point, the city was doing that. I think right before I got here, you all
Okay.
changed that policy.
Well-
And I think the philosophy, as I understood it coming in, was we wanted to encourage people to take that time, that was healthier for them to take that time than to get a payback. You're looking at it as a way to manage pension obligations long-term.
Yeah.
And so that's the trade-off component of that. The folks in the 5-year window, quite frankly, it's not nearly as big. The 3-year averaging, this is a bigger impact because the fewer number of years that you're counting against it. But from a policy standpoint, it is something you could look at and explore. We'd have to get a sense. I don't know if this year is any indication of what we would see every year or not, or what parameters you wanted to put around it. I would suggest if you went down that road, you at least maintain a minimum level that they would carry on, because we do want to encourage people to take that time to recharge and not just always be working and because they want to get an extra payout. So there may be a balance there that
Well,
you
it may
can
not be,
hit to.
it may not be anything that we even want to look at. I'm just looking at, when you say that there's a 10% openings, I guess, for the lack of a better term, then you're having to pay somebody to cover those 10% openings, and therefore they're not being able to take their vacation, but you're probably paying them at time and a half in order to cover the straight time hours. But I was just looking at that and thinking that, maybe somebody wants to sell back vacation time each year, and just look, you can look at it. I mean, it's not something I'm looking to change. I'm just, I didn't remember us doing the vacation sale back or buyback. And that would have been
It
15
wasn't-
years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly this structure, but it was similar. So we could look at what we used to do, what this is, try to give you some sense of what that might look like.
And if it's not something that's,
I'm not sure how much it would move the needle on this issue, but it would give us something to think about if you at least got some interest
yeah,
in
if
that.
you want to think about it, think about it. But I'm not suggesting we spend a great deal of time and a great deal of money and effort on this right here. This is what we're doing now. We've done the one-time vacation sale back. It's worked, and we'll go forward. Hopefully, we'll go forward without COVID at some point in time. Michael?
Moving forward, there are $470,000 of other expenses. I've already touched on the transportation controllers. We're adding $110,000 to the facilities management budget for various building maintenance repairs. Namely, the largest part is roof repairs to this structure that we're currently sitting in. The aforementioned replacement fire vehicle, additional costs for implementing our new budget software in this fiscal year, and then purchasing card automation of roughly $15,000, as well as some other smaller expense adjustments as well. Sanitation fund, you'll see in the sanitation fund, stormwater fund, and in the memo for the water management fund, there was a slight implementation delay in some billing, which has resulted in a slight reduction in revenues. This was covered within the last month to all of you via correspondence. They are insignificant in nature, but we are truing up our estimates. You also see expense increases of $64,000, nearly $65,000, once again in the aforementioned areas of cost of living adjustments and vacation sellback. I will note as well, another introduction point in budgeting, the other expenses is a true-up of our intra-fund transfers. We use as a established accounting tool that the utility funds, water management, sanitation, and stormwater, are charged a certain amount, which then gets put in the general fund for services that the general fund provides that if we did not exist, and I literally say we, city administration, finance, HR, IT, et cetera, it would be reasonable to assume that the utilities would have to provide on their own. So this amount was slightly off when we did the calculation at the beginning of the budget, and this trues it up moving forward. In the final two funds, the hotel motel tax fund has an increase of $305,000 for two purposes. One is $45,000 for wayfinding signs. You will hear a presentation on this on December 14th, which Planning Department will be bringing to you. This is to replace and establish, I think it's like 90 signs, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in that amount.
And an update of the wayfinding.
And an update of our-
associated with different attractions and
Yes.
especially historic locations in the city.
The goal is to standardize those signs throughout the city, because right now they are not.
So it may not be entirely additive of signs. It may be an update and replacement as well.
And then $260,000 for parking garage counters in the 2nd and 4th Avenue garages. I should note that you'll note that expenses are increasing by $305,000. They are offset by the $1.15 million which we appropriated into the Hotomoto Fund from the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Tourism and responding to the impacts of tourism were one of the allowable expense items. You'll hear more about the American Rescue Plan Act dollars in just a moment. Just trying to tee up. But these are expenses that account for that. Christine would like to just give a quick mention regarding the garage counters.
Something, certainly during the shutdown period, our two city garages were, it was very strange for us staff who are here every day because those two city garages that are typically full they were pretty much empty. And it actually, one of the things it gave us time to do was while we know that during typical business times and big tourism seasons, how heavily those garages are used 7 days a week, and our hospitality as well as our downtown businesses depend on those garages to be able to park their customers and also their staff. And we used that period to do research on, we have a counter system that we put in several years ago that has just not been accurate. Certainly we have a need to have those because of short-term parking, mid-range parking. We need to be able to have an accurate counter system so that these customers, some of whom are just not even familiar with the downtown, are able to find a place to park if we have that available in our two city garages. And our IT department did a great deal of research, and they also used that time to talk to references at some of these different companies, and they've identified a parking counter system which is used for some large universities. It's also, I believe, used at Disney, but it's a counter system that really is geared toward tourism, turnover type parking that we want to encourage our customers to downtown Franklin to be able to find a place to park for events and as well as for customers to have a place to park. So it's an acknowledgement that what we have right now, we cannot salvage that to be accurate. And the rescue plan does call for use of funds to help the industries of tourism and hospitality that have been so affected by the shutdown period. So that was the emphasis for us to really look at what, in using city assets, what would help that tourism and hospitality that has been so greatly affected, and getting their customers here in a way that is a pleasant experience was something that we we wanted to recommend.
And if you would like to know more about the technical details of this, Information Technology Director Jason Potts is available and can explain to your heart's content. If you would not like to know more about the technical details of parking garage counters, go for it.
I'd like to know how I'm gonna be counted.
At least Jason's not here for me to introduce
Yeah,
myself.
Jason to Jason.
I'm looking
yeah.
forward to that.
But I just want to say, Alderman Barnhill, in the city of Franklin, everyone counts.
That's right.
Patrick, nice to meet you. As Christine stated, we did make a large effort to utilize our video security cameras that we have in the parking garages. We have roughly 100 to 110 covering the different levels. So our goal with that system was to use the cameras that are in place. So we set those up with zones. And as low as the parking garage is, we had issues with those cameras not getting hit and bumped, which in turn reflected the accuracies. The time that our IT staff had spent and continues to spend to keep those numbers as accurate as possible, we feel better that we could use our time doing other technical tasks. So we are looking at this system. It's more of a traditional type parking system with individual lights per se. So there's Microsoft, Disney, there's some large Green Hills Mall that has these systems in place. Accuracy is a guaranteed 99%. So we can also put up maps that are forward-facing for the citizens to see. There'll be an app that they can use if they wanted to do that. So.
I believe, Jason, there would be a light over every parking space, and we would, if we only lit up, say, the ones which are empty, the drivers could see which, as they entered the floor even,
Correct.
where the exact location is of where the available spot would be.
It would be much more efficient and simplified solution.
Any questions of Jason?
And there'll be more on this as we get ready to move forward with the specific award. We're able to acquire this through a cooperative purchasing agreement, so we are going to be able to move fairly quickly on it once the board is comfortable. So we'll bring it forward to the whole board and get your blessing at sometime in the first of the year.
Jason, thank you. Michael?
Thank you.
The Water Management Fund has a net increase of $112,818 between revenues and expenses. You can see the expenses are for the aforementioned reasons of a cost of living adjustment, one retiree and vacation sellback. There are two final funds of note. I'll drop to the bottom first. Stormwater has similar revenue and expense changes for reasons mentioned. And the other large change is the City Facilities Tax Fund, and that is for reimbursement for Fire Station 7. This is the invoice to give Williamson County for an ambulance bay and their portion of the driveway apron. So we have transmitted that and expect to receive that and be able to record that during fiscal '22. And with that, if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will be happy if we could get a motion, and I will depart to go get a charger for my computer, which is starting to dim.
Any questions of Michael? I'll entertain a motion to present this to the full board.
Motion to recommend approval by the Board of Mayor and Alderman.
Proper motions,
Second.
proper motion to second. Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. Okay, item 12. Report of American Rescue Plan Act grant funds to the city of Franklin. Mike, you're up.
Good afternoon again. There's going to be a full presentation to the December 14th work session. So what I was thinking is I may just hit the highlights here at the committee, and I may actually go to page 3 to just mention how much money the city of Franklin was allocated from the American Rescue Plan Act. And what that amount is, it's $9.2 million in total, but it's actually 2 payments. And We already have received the first one of 4.6 million in May of 2021 and expect to receive the second payment of 4.6 million in May of 2022. And maybe just the financial highlights. Of the 4.6 million we've received, we've only spent so far $660,000 toward the premium pay, which was the $1,000 net pay to eligible employees. But there are some amounts the board has budgeted for the plan or for the funds. There is $50,000 that's been budgeted to go to the street aid fund. There is over $1 million budgeted to go to the hotel motel tax fund, as well as $1 million to go to the water and sewer fund. So those monies have been budgeted, but they haven't actually been spent as of this point. So there were uses in the law as to how they can be spent, and then there was some additional guidance. And I was thinking in the full presentation, I could go over all those types of things as to the allowable uses, as well as how we got to some of the amounts that we've been looking at.
So we made certain assumptions in the budget you approved. Those have, for the most part, are pretty well supported in what we've seen, but we did that at a time when the regs weren't even out, and this is still evolving. Plus now there's the infrastructure bill that's coming on behind it, and so we're trying to do the best we can in reading the crystal ball on all this about where to best put dollars that we see coming from the federal government and how this fits in. And so we wanted to give you sort of a status report of where we are. We've moved forward with some elements. There's some other things that are still coming through. And this is the first of several. We are one of 18 cities in the state of Tennessee that received the money directly. And the only city in Williamson County that's received money directly. The others will get theirs through the state, and I don't believe they've received theirs yet. That's still forthcoming, I believe. So we get it directly based on the allocation formula they have, and we've kind of put our best thoughts forward in terms of how we see those dollars being used. It does have a kind of a bias towards infrastructure in the water and sewer and broadband category. So we have certainly some needs, especially in water and sewer, that could fit that pretty nicely, that we're looking at. And of course, we've already done the additional supplement pay in July for our team members, and we used this resource for the eligible employees as most conservative reading we could take of those guidance for these dollars, and then filled in the gap for others that we weren't as certain on through local dollars to make that work. So Mike has the screen up. Michael has the screen up for Mike, so if there's anything you want to talk about specifically.
Yeah, I will mention that this is the uses that were provided in the law about responding to the public health emergency, the premium pay, which the city did utilize, government services due to reduction of revenue, and at your work session, I'll even go to show how we came up that we did have revenue loss calculated for the city of Franklin. And I guess also what Eric was saying about the water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure.
Any questions of Mike? If not, then Mike,
I've got one.
you go on, go ahead.
If we're planning to receive 9.2, I mean, and this isn't directly related, would it be wise for, because we just spent, or considering spending the 260 from this, right, on the parking, it seems like we might have some sort of prioritization of that 9.2 over the next couple of years, so as we don't find something. No, just maybe let's prioritize that spending.
Yeah, this is part of why we're bringing this to you. We have an initial cut that we included in this budget with our basic understanding. We have a 3-year window of time to use those dollars. So that's part of what we're giving you some guidance on. Here's what we know now more for certain than we knew when we submitted the budget in May. And I think you'll continue to see that evolve. But some of this is how efficient these dollars are to use. And I think the more we look at it, the more we see this infrastructure component in the water and sewer category probably being the cleanest route. But that's part of what we'll share with you in this and continue to get some feedback on the best priorities for these dollars. So we've been cautious in how we've used it, but we're learning more about what fits best.
It seems the 7.5, we have a pretty broad ability to spend of the revenue replacement funds, right? I mean,
There are.
there's a long list, so just lots of, prioritizing might be nice. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments of Mike? Mike, did you want to do the monthly reports?
Yes. I know the committee has heard lots of numbers, and I thought I might actually look at maybe 3 more off the monthly reports. And we do monthly reports in between our doing quarterly reports. So at your next Finance Committee meeting, we will actually have the first quarter report of 2022. We did add on the executive summary that with September, we've now had 6 consecutive months over $4 million. And those are the kind of numbers we used to always think of during the holiday months, but in essence, we've now had 6 in a row. And the city did begin receiving its portion of the additional 0.5% sales tax, and that's when this period did begin in April of 2021. And going down to the bottom about hotel motel tax, we talked about it last month, or I guess the previous meeting, and if you look at year to date, we're up by 93% over last year at this point. And it was kind of one of those that you asked Alderman Peterson, were we kind of back to where we were? And it is. The numbers we're seeing are kind of back to what we had seen before the pandemic. And the last piece of good news is on the conference center, October 2021 had a net profit of $88,000, and this is now the 3rd consecutive month us having a net profit.
And if I may mention a comment on the conference center, in my talks with the staff who run that center, they've had an extraordinary fall. That there were events that first were planned in 2020 that bumped out and until maybe late 20, early 2021 calendar years, and then they asked, when things weren't quite where they wanted it to be, early this calendar year, they asked to come into the fall. And they have been booming because of rescheduled events. And they worked with people to reschedule, groups that really wanted to have an event. And of course, typically the events that we have at our conference center are drive-in events. People come from the region or the state of Tennessee, and they have that flexibility to do so. So they have had a very, very busy fall, and they're booked very, very heavily even through the winter. I was surprised even that here the week after Thanksgiving that they were completely booked with events. But those were ones that were planned for earlier and then got rescheduled. So there is a little bit of the compounding. I mean, we certainly we can't predict the future, but they on the books right now have events that are rescheduled from a little while back on through really late winter time. So we'll just have to see how things go. But that's a flavor of what the structure, what it has looked like the last 3 months or so. Certainly a lot of events that have been put together very quickly. I even talked to an event planner the other day when her job had been asked to plan events pretty quickly this fall because they felt that was a good time to do that, and so I'm sure that it sounds like that is something that's been experienced, in a regional conference center. So we've been very pleased and with the level of activity here in the last little while.
Any other questions of Mike on the monthly report? We've got one other item on the agenda, meeting schedule. January, we met on Thursday of the month, except for this coming January meeting. And we're being requested to meet on the 3rd Thursday of the month. And the times have been, because of the
I remember whenever I was still employed,
Yeah.
I could not meet at the times that we have been currently meeting. And it may be that there are some other people that would not work for, because, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, unless you are very fortunate, are not always possible.
Yeah, I know that's a factor, and I don't know if there's a better day or a time. Of course, we don't have Alderman Potts with us to know, and that points to what could be a challenge for him. So I don't know if the three of you want to give us a general sense, and we can reach out to him further and then follow up with that. Or, we're open to it. We want to make sure we're accommodating. But with those budget sessions, you can count on those being 3-hour meetings. That's just the way it is, to get through the content that the departments are presenting and the other things that lead up to the budget. But we'll work with whatever works for your schedules.
I'm happy to do whatever the committee feels, and want to be respectful of staff's time as well. So, I mean, we could even, 1 to 4 is what, or 2 to 5. I mean, I know it's probably nice to be able to staff to pack up and get, out before 5, around 5. But the better, the further toward, ended, I'm sure is better for others in the workforce. But I'm gladly to do 1 to 4 as well. So whatever the committee decides.
And
Mr. Chairman, could you turn your mic on, please?
And I still am looking at the times that we've had in the past. I know the length of time that we've gotten, because some of those meetings, maybe once or twice, was even longer than 3 hours. So we started at 1 and didn't finish up till after 4. So I would still prefer to have the times that we had. And if it's inconvenient for someone, you can communicate that, because there's only one person that's not here. You can communicate those times and days, and we'll see what we need to do. But I agree with Alderman Baggett. I think it's in consideration of staff's time. Guess you want to start at 4, we'll end at 8 on some of those nights. Okay, and so I'm not. That's what we did years ago, and exactly. So we've kind of gotten, the evolution is we've gotten away from that. I still prefer the times that we've had in the past. The days don't generally matter to me, but the 1 o'clock especially those 4 months where we're tremendously tied up at 1 p.m. until the meeting is over.
Does the day matter for anybody else? That's one thing to think about.
That is the point.
Yeah, so.
But as I say, I can remember whenever I was still employed and was an alderman, I could not have met. I mean, I could not have met at 1 or even 2, because I had no control over my work schedules, But now, probably any time, I can't think of a. I think Thursday would be better for me than, say, Wednesday or something like that, and so.
Why don't we publish the times and see what the feedback is?
We'll reach out and
See what he has to say.
And that would be 2 p.m. for the January, and then we would start with 1 p.m.
1 p.m., 1 p.m.,
February
1 p.m.
through May.
Right.
And then,
And then back to 2 on the 16th, 11th, 8th, 13th.
and we appreciate your consideration of the January and June being a week later in those months. If that's something that advanced you can accommodate. We have a staff member who's going to give a presentation to us, to the committee, on January 20th, that she can be here that day. And then in June, there is a Government Finance Officers Association conference that is right now supposed to happen. It hasn't happened in be 3 years. Going on 3 years, but
The
right
big
now it's
question is
scheduled.
it at the Cool Springs Conference Center?
I wish it was.
Because if it is, we would definitely accommodate it. But
Well, all of us have given our time to help out with other conferences at our conference center, so we do support our conference center.
So just look at those and see what Jason's schedule is on that, And, and,
We'll get it out to everybody.
and with the, yeah, I can make any day pretty much. Any other business to come before the committee? As the mayor would say, his favorite motion, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I hear none. We are adjourned.